I'm Sarah Byer-Ellis, Regional Office Manager for the Division of Child Care Services, Albany Regional Office. According to the Sustainable Schools Project, educating for sustainability is defined as learning that links knowledge, inquiry, and action to help children build a healthy future for themselves, their communities, and the planet. Sustainability, along with STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math programming such as gardening, recycling, and composting, provides children with effective, high-quality teaching and learning experiences, encouraging the use of critical thinking while working towards a sustainable future. During this training, you will discover why there is a growing recognition for educating for sustainability in early childhood. You will also find out how you can use sustainability as your lens to envision your entire program, from how decisions are made, to curriculum content, to configuring your play spaces and connecting with families. The New York State Office of Children and Family Services applauds your enthusiasm to provide children and families with hands-on experiences that educate for sustainability.
Hello, and welcome to the New York State Office of Children and Family Services training, Educating for Sustainability. I'm Christine Priest. Every day you strive to make a positive difference in the lives of the children you care for and their families. The learning experiences you provide can benefit the children in your program and the world. Educating for Sustainability is an opportunity to build this foundation and model best practice. During this training, we'll explore how the many learning activities, some of which you may already be doing, complement the emerging need for sustainability education. By the end of this training, you'll be able to incorporate the big ideas of sustainability to promote various styles of learning, design thoughtful sustainability and STEAM activities and programming, and arrange your play spaces to stimulate learning and encourage family engagement. If you have questions throughout the training, be sure to call, fax, or email us at the information on your screen. Let's take a moment to meet our experts, Bonnie Schultz and Jed Norris. Bonnie is a registered dietitian with the Capital District Child Care Council, currently implementing the Eat Well, Play Hard preschool curriculum at child daycare programs. She enjoys gardening and composting and has worked with 4-H youth to develop community gardens along with science explorations. As a middle school teacher, she has seen the power of open-ended questions, helping students explore and find their own answers. Welcome. Jed is an early childhood program coordinator at Shelbourne Farms in Vermont. There, he coordinates the Preschool Adventures program that runs in the fall, winter, and spring while helping child care programs right here in New York State implement sustainability programming. Jed has years of experience as an early childhood teacher and a program director. Welcome to you both. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Sustainability is defined as improving the quality of life for all, now and for future generations, economically, socially, and environmentally. In other words, working to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The broad nature of these definitions allows your program to define and incorporate sustainability curriculum on your own terms. So let's get started. What's the history behind sustainability?
Well, Christine, one of the things that I really enjoy talking about with teachers and educators when I work with them is that sustainability means so many different things to so many different people. So no matter, historically, sustainability has been happening forever. Cultures have been figuring out what their limits are and living within those limits in a win-win situation and not so much of, and possibly they might have to compromise some of their needs at times, but it's only to benefit something else that interdependently rely on each other. So I worked recently with a school in Burlington, the Family Room, and in order to kind of start this story or this journey on creating a definition of sustainability for your program, we always go in and talk about like what do people know about it, and it's kind of an inaccessible term. A lot of people go to recycling and composting, but it has a whole other heavy definitions involved with it. And so I wanted to read one of the group's definition. Okay. Sustainability is being mindful of our actions and thoughts that create a meaningful and connected society that will be beneficial to the future. So I really liked it. It sat with me. It was really like empowering to sit back and watch this group of teachers come up with this all together. And they left feeling very connected to the definition.
Yeah. It sounds like you're really putting that modernization into that sustainability project.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of them, you know, everybody comes from different backgrounds. So what sustains you means a lot of different things. And you bring that in, and it helps get people more on a deeper relationship with each other, which I think only benefits your work later.
You're bringing us right to my next question. What's being done to meet that challenge of sustainability?
I think a lot of people are looking at thinking globally and acting locally, and they know that the young generation is open to so much, and that's a great time to be trying to reach out and explaining, well, on a grand scale of things, we have economies and we have ways that we get things, and then in our local community we have people who serve different roles, and then on an even more micro scale, more hands-on of what they're doing, we can be doing things ourselves, we can be growing things ourselves, we can be exploring the outdoors together and seeing how even insects, animals, plants, and we work together.
I know worldwide there's initiatives and things going on that really connect not just these local child daycares and family daycares, but there's these worldwide things. Tell us a little about that.
I mean, I think that globally it's become a big issue because we see that we're on a path that's not going to be there forever. So when I think about sustainability and I kind of think about, well, why wouldn't we do this? If we're going to run out of resources or we're going to fraction ourselves, then that doesn't make sense. That's not where we want to go. So we need to rein things back in. We need to rethink where we're going.
How can we do this as educators?
Well, I think that you know, on the boots, training, working with teachers who are working with kids directly on exposure to where their place is. I think for them it starts right in their home and the community. Then it moves to their outdoors, to maybe the store down the street, and then as they get older, I think, you know, their span grows a little bit more with them. So I think that's how we do it. That's how we start. Yeah. Educate. If we want change, we can't just say we need to end world hunger. We need to teach a 2-year-old how to grow food, or at least have exposure to how to grow food. And there is not anybody who's more influential in a family than a 2-year-old at mealtime.
Definitely. In general, we think of sustainability as having the following intertwined goals: economic prosperity, environmental integrity, and social equity or fairness. Since the concept of sustainability has many layers, it's helpful to break it down into small chunks or big ideas. This next video explains. Let's watch.
You can use the following big ideas of sustainability to help frame curriculum, projects, and build toward child understanding. Community, a group of living and non-living things sharing a common purpose or space. Diversity, all systems and places function because of variety. Interdependence, all living things are connected. Every organism, system, and place depends on others. Cycles, every organism and every system goes through different stages. Change over time. All organisms, places, and systems are constantly changing. And fairness and equity. Resources are shared to meet the needs of living things across places and generations. For additional big ideas you can use to explore sustainability in your program, visit the Sustainable Schools Project website.
So we just heard about these big ideas. How can learning be framed within these big ideas or around these big ideas?
I think you can take community and you can look at it at many different levels. And let's just go, since we have the gardening theme in mind, with the gardening level. And children are there, and perhaps they would take something like, oh, this diverse arrangement of lettuce, all these different varieties of lettuce. And they're going to want to take some and put it into the soil to plant it. While they're there, they might be seeing all kinds of little insects. They might be seeing worms in there, and some are going to be a little bit frightened. But if we're there to help acclimate them and let them know that they're okay, and these creatures all help the soil and or part of the community that makes the overall environment stronger, then they make a little bit more friends with that. And that's an entranceway or an example of how we can include a couple of those things.
Sounds like a lot of fun, too.
Just to add on to that, thinking about all the critters, and to me, interdependence is a really big idea, and it's how we rely on the people and also animals in our environment. And so like sometimes we'll go out and do like a worm test and see how healthy our soil is, and you can revisit it. You know, if you add maybe some hay over the winter, maybe you check it in November, add hay or straw on top, and then maybe check it starting in March and see when the worms are coming back up. To me, it's like a cool way to look at the cycle while also focusing on the interdependence of the jobs of the worms. Like, we all have these jobs.
Yeah, that sounds fun, and a great way to incorporate your compost into learning. Yeah. So education for sustainability, or EFS, can be defined as education that cultivates or develops in children an understanding of the world that is interconnected, that builds knowledge of children's human and natural communities, and provides children with opportunities to make a difference through service learning. What are the benefits of sustainability education in early childhood?
They just go on and on because they're setting up their framework for what they think the world is. And the more connections they see, and they see their own place in that world, then the more confidence they develop.
Sounds great.
Just to go off of that, I think it gives them a power of their voice, and part of our job as early educators is always to advocate for the rights of the child, and that they are an important citizen. When I was an infant teacher, we used to talk about how they were our youngest citizens, and getting out and about in the community was so important, just to show that they are here, they have rights, they have abilities, they deserve to be here just as much as everybody else. They're not just getting plopped in front of things, but they actually want to visit some of these places.
Does it help them to develop these lifelong skills when you start that early?
Absolutely, yeah. I think any, repetition is really key, and any exposure that we can get earlier, say it's to greens, and starting it as like a plant, like this is a plant, not a food, brings like a whole other realm of like exploration to it. As soon as we start to add in that it's a food, it starts to bring in some of that like healthy pressures to it. But I think, us looking at these as plants, starting off with infants and young toddlers, just exposes them to greens are okay. They're in our world. We can pick them. We can smell them. They have textures. They have colors. All the things that they love.
How can we use EFS to enhance our program? Talking about the larger goal of quality of life and long-term goals in that manner.
Yeah, I think EFS gives us kind of a base of developing an acceptance of diversity, seeing interdependence, whether it's in the garden with the critters, or whether you're walking down the street, or whether you're visiting a store. You see how you rely on other people. I think that's really important. It brings value to your community, increases your strength of place, which is really key. I think you have to I sometimes battle a lot with getting kids telling me fun facts from TV shows, which is great, but it's really great when I can bring them out at a pond and we can find some critters that they did not know even existed, and now that they know, they're right in your community. I always want them to walk away thinking like, I have a better chance of seeing some of these critters than I do maybe an elephant because it's continents away.
You mentioned TV and kids talking about the TV. Earlier we were discussing the Heroes program that you had in one of your programs.
Yeah.
Can you just fill us in a little on that?
Yeah, so there was a classroom at Burlington Children's Space in Burlington, Vermont, and there was a really big desire for superhero play in that space. And so the teachers kind of turned it into not so much like superheroes are capturing the bad guys, but really breaking it down to like, what are superheroes doing for other people? And they're really helping the community, and they're looking for ways to help people. So this group, the kids all designed their own superhero costumes, and then they started doing jobs in the school. So they would put on their they called them helping heroes, and they would collect the laundry for everybody, bring it down, put it in, bring it back. Then they started putting up ads in their neighborhood about helping heroes, and the kids would quote like, "Call us if there's a fire, call us if you need help, call us if you need us to shovel your driveway." And they did go out and shovel a couple driveways. And then it kind of morphed into, as they were walking to playgrounds in their area, there was a lot of trash, especially at the end of winter. So they started walking around with a wagon and with gloves and picking up garbage as they walked. And I think one important thing is that these interests ebb and flow. And so sometimes everybody's really into it, and then sometimes it kind of wanes off, but it tends to come back.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Children effectively learn about the world around them, as Jen was just talking about, when the walls of the program disappear and learning opportunities are offered at home, in nature, and out in the community. Community partners can help you prepare children for school and citizenship by offering additional supports and enrichment activities. We had the opportunity to visit the Radix Ecological Sustainability Center, a community organization partnering with various educational programs in its area. The center's educational director, Scott Kellogg, shares his thoughts on the importance of exposing children to resources found within their own community. Let's watch.
We are at the Radix Ecological Sustainability Center. We're a nonprofit organization here in the south end of Albany, New York, developing a demonstration site of sustainable tools and technologies that are designed to teach urban residents, with a special focus on youth, how to have more local access and control over essential resources such as food and water, waste management, and energy production.
Chicken!
So here we have our micro livestock, which are animals that are smaller than cows or horses or pigs. They are animals that eat less, take up less space, all in all being more appropriate to have in an urban environment. And great to really bring in kids and let them do just what we call chicken education, to become familiar with these animals that, again, many times when you're living in the city, you may not be familiar with them, to understand where eggs come from, and about waste cycles, and about how to produce nutritious food in your own backyard. We have honeybees on the property who have an important job here, and that's to pollinate all the vegetables and the fruit trees that we have, and also really important for our educational system to teach kids about the important role that bees play in ecosystem processes, but also food production, and also just to more directly show them where honey comes from. So this is our solar greenhouse, where we're able to keep systems alive and growing throughout the year, which is fantastic to have in a cold climate, because our growing season is more or less the opposite of the school year. So this way kids can come here in the middle of the winter and have a chance to learn about plants and biological systems, even in the dead of winter. What's your favorite plant in here?
Probably
the passion flower. It's pretty cool, huh? And what I like to say to educators is, you want to get kids interested in the STEM disciplines, bring them to a living laboratory such as this, where you can see science, physics, chemistry, ecology, biology, add on a layer of social sciences and economics, see the synthesis of it all together, and then get them excited about that, and then work backwards from that point.
Where's the fishy at?
So this is an aquaponics system, which is a way to grow fish and plants together in a closed-loop recirculating system, in such a way where the wastes produced by the fish become nutrients for plants that are also growing in the system. This is a fantastic teaching tool, a way for kids to learn about aquatic ecology, about fish, about aquatic biological processes, but also to tie it in with broader conversations, for instance, the health of the Hudson River and the fact that we're not able to eat fish out of here, but here is a way that you can be providing fish protein for urban residents that is going to be non-toxic, while we're simultaneously working to restore the health of the river. We do educational programs for students of a whole variety of age groups, pre-K through PhD, as we say, but also, really importantly, adult education as well. But a couple examples of that, we have the Children's South End Cafe group come in, who are mostly elementary age school children who come in 1 day a week, typically on Tuesday afternoons. And with children that age, it's more really physical work and hands-on, and just really, developing a sense of love and familiarity and connection with a lot of these natural systems.
Do you guys know any other sources of protein?
We love the Radix Center. We come every Tuesday, and we also come any day the gate's open. The kids will walk by after school and say, the Radix Center is open, so then we will come over and see the chickens and the bunnies and go into the greenhouse. We just really love partnering with the Radix Center. It's taught the kids about gardening, about composting. We compost at the cafe, and then we bring our food to oh, you have your chicken. We bring a rooster. Is that a rooster?
No, it's a chicken.
A chicken? We bring our food to the Radix Center for composting. The kids are able to hold the chickens, hold the bunnies, walk around. Scott helped them tap a maple tree, which was really cool. So I think that not only is the Radix Center beautiful, but it's also a way to teach us to live a sustainable life and to care about the earth.
Strawberries are the only one with the seeds.
On the outside.
On the outside.
The advice I would give to providers looking to create relationships with community organizations is to get a sense of who is out there in their immediate vicinity. I'm a strong believer in experiential education and therefore place-based and neighborhood-based education. So I think it's really important for children to see systems, particularly sustainability systems, social systems, modeled in their very own communities. It's one thing to demonstrate it on a classroom level, but much more important, or equally important in many ways, to see it actually applied and implemented on a neighborhood scale as well.
It's a cactus.
I would say if somebody was interested in seeing what's available in the community, I would take a walk in the neighborhood, walk around, see what's there. Sometimes there's hidden treasures that you don't even know about. Of course, you can do some research on your own. You can visit the local library and see what is available. So I would encourage anybody to just see who is in the neighborhood, outside of the neighborhood, that can bring something to the table to enrich the lives of the children and the families.
I believe it's really important to reach people, children, when they're young, when their hearts and their minds are open. Working with both elementary school and high school age children, there's a pretty significant shift that happens between those years where kids start to close down a little bit and become a little bit too cool for school and act disinterested. They may genuinely be interested, but might be embarrassed to actually show that. But when kids are young, first, second, third grade, they just have this amazing sense of wonder that is great to tap into and take advantage of, and to instill them with those feelings of love and connection while they are open to it, and that's going to shape and inform their attitudes for the rest of their lives, and that's what's necessary for creating a conscious and concerned citizenry as adults.
Check this one out.
Oh, chocolate plants.
Yeah, this is a carnivorous plant. Look at that.
EFS curriculum focuses on play-based, place-based, emergent, and culturally relevant programming. During the video, Scott spoke about the importance of place-based learning. Place-based education or learning is defined as immersing children in local heritages, cultures, landscapes, opportunities, and experiences, and uses these contexts as a foundation for the study of language arts, mathematics, social studies, science, and other subjects across the curriculum. So tell me, what is meant by place, and what are some examples?
If we look at a child's first place, it's generally the home. And then from there, it just keeps expanding as they get more and more experiences, perhaps a program or a school, and then going out further the community with libraries and senior centers. And for one program that I'm working with now, they have a police station across the street. And they've actually created a learning experience where there's a garden at that police station that the daycare children go and tend to. So there's all kinds of connections just depending on what's locally around. And that gives them perspective.
And I can imagine it grows as they get older, their world around them.
Ever expanding. Yes.
Great.
Can I add one
yeah,
thing?
please.
The reciprocity of that relationship between the police department and the children that are taking care of their gardens, I think is a really important part when you do get out into the community, that how can we work together? And I think it was in that video clip with the feeding the chickens and collecting the eggs. There can be a job, like we can go visit a farm, but we can also do a helpful job for the farmer. I think that just helps develop that importance of that place of meaning, and it gives kids a kind of a foundation. They'll always remember picking up that chicken or weeding the police department garden bed.
So you're bringing us right to the value of place-based learning. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I think it's the cool thing with place-based, or when I work with providers, is thinking about their place as a place of possibilities instead of a place of barriers. For example, we had at our week-long workshop some teachers come from kind of the urban area of Burlington, and they didn't have a playground. They always had to go on outings, and so we did a lot of work out in the forest on like how to work with groups in the forest. These are activities that you can do, and they were like, "This is great, but we have no access to woods. Like maybe there's singular trees." And so we kind of reframed it to like, "Well, what do you have?" And they were, they almost were neighbors to like the major food co-op in Burlington where all the farmers are coming to. And so what maybe a rural home care provider has woods and fields to play in, they don't really have community of people. They might have like the UPS driver or the mail carrier come by, and that could be their regular connection. But the people who are in kind of more urban environments have more access to so many more people. And I think it's a really, again, going back to the advocacy for children and for early ed.
Providers may have heard that term service learning. Can you guys tell us a little about what that means? Is it different than place-based learning?
I think it has more of a purpose to it. And so if there can be some conversation about what the children see around them, and they can be coming up with the ideas of what can be improved, then they're already halfway there designing and then implementing an actual project to solve a problem. And that's just tremendous as far as communication and planning skills go, but talk about self-worth and cooperation to get it going. It's taking the place-based learning that you may have a service project at a certain locale, and it's really making it into a project where they're doing good.
As you're talking about this, I'm thinking about safety, safety, safety. How do we keep the kids safe while we do this?
We have to always evaluate the situation in the area, and when we have the conversations with the children at the beginning, that gives us step by step an opportunity to be thinking, what's involved, who's involved, what are the potential risks, and then it's fair. Talk to them about the appropriate level of things that we see as a risk and have them help find workarounds or help guide them to those workarounds.
And you're mentioning guiding, it's because you're always there supervising, I'm guessing, right? You need
Absolutely.
That constant supervision. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was thinking just adding maybe a pre-meeting one with the other people that could be, like if you're doing a service learning project for somebody in your building or somebody in the community, really including them so they know what's coming at them. Not everybody's prepared for 15 preschoolers to come into their space. So, and then also maybe going over kind of what kids are expecting to see, and maybe even providing some pictures. Like if you know you're going to be going into like a shop, for example, it'll pay off to just go and take a couple pictures of like, this is what the door looks like. When you walk in, it's a little bit tight. This is what it looks like. This is where we're gonna stand, and whatnot. So just like prepping, I think it just gives kids that extra advantage of having it be successful.
Yeah, the importance of planning ahead is really, really vital.
Yeah, and then reflecting back on what was the unexpected things that you noticed. Because I think a lot of the times, if we're on an outing with a group of kids, they're mapping their place by landmarks that we don't see, that we're just walking right by. We think of like road signs, and they're not thinking that. They're thinking about like, Betty who lives in the White House, who has the dog that barks at the window.
Opportunities for play-based activities is also important, as play and learning go hand in hand. During this next video, Dr. Peter Gray, author of Free to Learn, defines play and discusses why unleashing the instinct of play makes children happier, more self-reliant, and better students for life. Let's watch.
Play is not wasted time for children. That there are all these things that children learn in play and that cannot be taught. They could really only be learned in play. They're learned in experience, and for children, experience comes from play. How to get along with other kids. That's probably the most important thing any of us has to learn, is how to get along with peers. How do you, in a social situation, get your needs met while making sure that the other people involved are getting their needs met? First of all, the word play is a word that we use in a lot of different ways. So what play means to me and most play researchers is it's an activity that is defined by the confluence of 4 different characteristics. So one characteristic is that it's self-chosen and self-directed. And I really emphasize that because, you know, we talk about our kids playing baseball or soccer when it's not self-chosen, and it may, even if it's self-chosen, it's not self-directed. So I don't consider that adult-directed activities to be play. Play is activity that children are choosing for themselves and directing themselves. It's really how children learn to create their own activities, how children learn to direct their own activities. The second characteristic of play is that it's intrinsically reinforcing, it's intrinsically motivating. You're doing it just because you want to do it. You're not doing it to get a trophy, you're not doing it to get praise from your parents or a teacher, you're not doing it for grades, you're not doing it to improve your resume, you're just doing it because you want to do it. And play is how children explore and learn what they like to do. It's how they develop their passions, their interests, and those who are lucky maybe go on and pursue careers at what they enjoy doing as children in play. So the third characteristic of play is, seems a little counterintuitive to many people, and that's that it is always structured. We talk about unstructured play, but there's no such thing as unstructured play. It's always structured, and it's structured by the child or the children themselves if there's a group playing together. So play is really, it's not random, it's freely chosen, but it's not random activity. The children entering into play are putting themselves into a defined activity that they have in mind, and they're structuring their behavior in accordance with a set of rules which may be implicit or may be explicit. So play, the structure of play and the creation of rules about play is how children learn to create and abide by socially agreed upon rules. And the fourth characteristic of play is that there's always an element of imagination. Some play is more imaginative than others, but all play involves some kind of stepping out of the real world. You're in this pretend world. It's a play castle you're making if you're building a castle. If you're little children playing, you know, goblins or witches or Wonder Woman or whatever it is, you're pretending to be somebody that you normally aren't, and you're following out that role. The most important material, if you will, for play for any kid is kids to play with. You know, some people might like to think that kids are naturally attracted to the great outdoors, but that's sort of a cultivated interest. Kids are naturally attracted to other kids, and the most important stimulant for play is other kids to play with. As long as there's something there, they'll find something. That you don't have to have elaborate toys, you just have to have space and opportunity. Everybody's concerned about learning, they're not concerned about happiness. So now I've learned to say that because children learn so much in play that they can't learn in any other way. Things that can't be taught, they learn in play. That automatically invites at least another question. Oh, what do they learn? And then I get to talk about the value of play. And then I can slip in, oh, and by the way, it also makes children happy, you know, as an incidental side benefit.
All families want their children to grow up to be healthy and the best at whatever they choose to do. As a result, sometimes opportunities for play in early childhood are lost because providers feel pressured to provide structured learning activities. How can we as educators balance those opportunities for play and learning?
I think this is really a trick question. What do you think, Ted?
It's definitely a trick question. I can't see the difference between the two.
Tell me why.
Play is learning. And for young kids especially, their curiosity is at like an all-time high. And just as Dr. Gray pointed out, that they want to be around people. Sometimes I refer to it as like they're social monsters, and they just crave being around people. So it's like a really great time to, when you're playing, and I always tell people my job of choice, my career is playing with a purpose. And it's facilitating, supporting kids in their social kind of scripts with each other to lead to successful play. There's so many different social norms that we can help build in, and different ideas and diverse ideas, and figuring out how Bonnie has an idea. It's a little bit different than my idea, but we can still come together and compromise. And if we can't, that's a learning opportunity that we can bring back, and we can bring back to our group too. And if I wipe out and get hit with something, it's another learning opportunity, and it's an opportunity for us to bring in the empathy of the group, which is there from a really young age.
I think there's a place for the structured learning, but the real magic happens when the children then take that and interpret themselves, and maybe they're expressing it through dance, or maybe they're expressing it through talking or just investigating. So there's a balance, but the magic happens when they direct it.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. For more information and ideas on play-based learning, refer to page 10 in your participant materials. Many learning experiences, like the ones we saw at the Raddick Center, are rooted in several different contexts, including nature, food, and the community. These areas help foster children's essential connections to the environment, as well as provide for their overall development. So, what learning opportunities does nature provide?
Endless learning opportunities. I was an infant toddler teacher for 7 years, and I've had 2 kids of my own, and with a crying infant, the quick fix, go outside. There's all this like sensory experience that they can have. None of it's too overwhelming. There's a light breeze, there's birds chirping, there's leaves overhead moving. And then as you get older, there's open-ended materials all over the place, whether you find a stick, a rock, grass, stumps, a down tree. To me, it offers up endless opportunities to play, and gives constant feedback to kids. And it's not, as we are always keeping safety in mind, but some of these materials give a lot of feedback. They have a smell to them. They might challenge kids with a little bit of a jump from a high height onto a soft, mossy ground. Might be nice.
And when I think about keeping the materials safe, it's a lot about having conversations with the children about appropriate uses for different things. Because anything can be safe or dangerous depending on how we use it. And that's a lesson we learn and then can apply throughout life.
Now, there's definite benefits to spending time outdoors. Can you tell us a little about that?
They find that children who have that experience outdoors have actually greater attention because they are attending to whatever the stimulus is. And things like ADHD can actually be lessened by it. It's opening up a lot of different choices for them to attend to this or that and to keep their attention where they want it before something else pulls them in a different direction.
Great. Bonnie, I'm going to ask you, how about food? What learning opportunities does food provide?
There's so many things that we can grow. A lot of people think about growing flowers and tulips. So that's wonderful and certainly something that we can grow. I brought in some garlic. You can take some if you want. Because whether we get this at the grocery store or we grow it ourselves, like you might plant a tulip bulb, you could plant these cloves in the spring. We can explore the garlic with all of our senses. So when we get it in our hands and we start feeling it and maybe crunching a little bit and maybe even smelling it, we're making friends with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we were lucky enough to have this in the ground, the roots were down below and we were digging it out and we saw that stem and we popped it out, and then we can after it dries. Break it apart until we get to the center. And we're feeling paper and then smooth pieces and seeing the inside roots and the tip where the new plant will grow. So in this way, we haven't eaten it yet, but we've heard it, we've smelled it, we've touched it. And then if we think it's okay, we might put it on our tongue. Maybe give it a lick. Or if we think it's okay, a teeny tiny bite. And make up our own minds. It's a little bit hot.
And I'm guessing that children being able to see things grow from seed to plant or to flower really is important. Tell me more about that. Tell me why.
It gives them the idea of the whole life cycle. And once they've seen the whole life cycle, they can then look to other plants and see what's similar and different. They establish vocabulary with a stem, and a stem on a leaf of lettuce looks quite different than a stem on the garlic, yet stems are strong. Maybe they relate that to their own bodies. Hey, we're off of plants now, and they're trying to make connections to themselves. If I were a plant, what part of me would be my stem? And perhaps they'd say their spine, perhaps they'd say their bones, who knows? But they're thinking about it and thinking about integrating and making connections.
That sounds great. How do different learning styles and contexts assist in child development?
I really enjoyed going out on site, and there was a child who was digging in the ground and exploring, and then they decided they were going to be a worm, and so they started sort of doing a worm dance, squirming on the ground, and then that got other children engaged. That was one way where they're using art, the art of dance, and that just brought everybody else along, and it was nice, spontaneous play.
That sounds like a lot of fun. What about things like academic success, character development? Does playing outside and connecting with sustainability work for that?
I think that gets to what you were saying with the children working together and solving their problems.
Yeah. A lot of role playing happens outside. Kind of one of my favorite places to play when we're outside is in a mud kitchen. I think it offers up like endless opportunities to create jobs for kids, whether you have kids that want to be the makers, and they're kind of the sous chefs or the chefs, or whether you want to have the kids that are like really deep in empathy and they want to be the servers, or maybe there's kids that are really creative and they want to create the menu, or maybe there's kids that are really good at going off and foraging. And they're picking like the little flowers that they're finding. With supervision, not too far, within sight. And they're bringing back kind of what they've just freshly picked for you to include into your dish. I think it offers up a lot of different social transfer, like ways where they can transfer those skills into other areas of their life.
You guys sound like you're having a lot of fun. I want to come and hang out with you guys.
That's the best learning, when we're having fun.
Yeah, definitely. Children are more likely to engage in place-based learning or service learning when they care about and connect with an issue that affects their own community. In this next video, we'll give you some ideas on where to start and how you can assist children in building a sense of caring and action. Let's watch.
Here are some tips to help you cultivate a sense of self-value, service, and a culture of caring in young children. Listen to the children when they have an idea for making a difference. Ask them questions to guide their thinking about what may or may not be feasible. Incorporate the planning of a project into your curriculum. Keep the duration of the project short. Young children's interests change rapidly. Service learning will be most effective if children start and finish the project in a short amount of time, without a lapse in between. Help children make connections between their interests, experiences, and learning by asking, how can we help? And is there something we can do? Give children ample opportunities to learn how others in the community help, and then ask the children how they can help. Record their ideas. Encourage children to make a plan. Reflect on their plan and revise it based on new learning and understanding. Have children take care of something. Whether it's a house plant, a garden, or a special place, teaching children to care builds the foundation for service learning and civic engagement in the future. Keep projects close to the program and concrete, where children can see the results of their work. By giving young children the opportunity to make a positive difference in the lives of those they care about, they learn that they matter and that they do make a difference.
Learning experiences may be enhanced by a field trip to a nearby resource center like the Radix Center. Remember, there are several regulations to be mindful of when planning and engaging in field trips. Let's highlight a couple. Regulations state that the director must approve all plans for field trips, including the type of activity, developmental needs of children, and whether there's a need for additional staff to provide adequate supervision. Such plans must take into consideration the developmental needs of the children. Regulations also state that all field trips with an itinerary that includes an activity where emergency medical care is not readily available and/or such an activity such as, but not limited to, wilderness hiking, rock climbing, horseback riding, bicycling, must be accompanied by a staff who possess a current first aid CPR certification. Please refer to your modalities regulations for a full list of regulations and rules by visiting the OCFS website at the information on your screen. The next video shares steps you can take to arrange and prepare for outings within your community. Let's watch.
Being prepared for community outings with children takes proper planning and organization. Try these tips for success developed by Burlington Children's Space the next time you plan an activity beyond your program's walls. You should know the space, the route, and the risks and resources, including bathrooms, water stations, and bus stops. Take practice walks ahead of time without the children to become familiar with the area. The people you meet are not to be avoided, but greeted and included as part of the learning experience, allowing children to be active participants in their community. It's important for you to be aware of children's anxieties or worries about outings. You need to make sure children will be warm enough, have comfortable shoes, provide bathroom opportunities, and offer food for the extra energy they may need. Collaboration and trust is essential between you, the children, and the group. You should communicate any fears and worries to others so a plan can be made. If a group member does not like crossing busy streets or is concerned about poison ivy, then a different route or destination can be planned. Addressing these concerns as a team allows for the team to decide if you will address the fear or find an alternative.
You got it?
Involve children in all phases of the outing, from making snacks, to voting on destinations, to packing the outing bag, and helping each other when a problem comes up. Children can be involved in finding routes, making maps, photographing landmarks along the route, discussing which way to go when reaching an intersection, estimating the length of a leg of the trip, or documenting what they see along the way. A camera and/or journals are essential tools. As the spaces you visit become more familiar and the children build confidence and exploration, these places become part of your program culture. Familiar scripts develop more complexities, and what was once the unexpected transforms into the anticipated.
During this segment, we defined sustainability, described its goals, and discussed its importance in early childhood education. We also examined sustainability's big ideas and explored various learning strategies. On page 14 in your participant materials, take the next few minutes to identify opportunities for play-based, place-based, and service learning in your program and community, and how you can expand on these experiences. Then share your ideas with the group at your site. When we return, we'll explore how to design thoughtful and engaging programming, including crafting essential questions and incorporating STEAM activities. We'll see you soon. Welcome back. There are many tools and resources available to help you provide engaging and emerging programming, including the core body of knowledge, New York State's core competencies for early childhood educators, which outlines recommended practices for educators, as well as the New York State Early Learning Guidelines. This lists developmental milestones children attain between birth and age 5. An important first step when designing programming is to identify the intended outcome, goals, or big ideas you want children to come away with. During this next video, we'll explain how you can use common themes or essential questions to help enhance your existing curriculum and incorporate opportunities for sustainability education. Let's watch.
Developing Educating for Sustainability curriculum can begin anywhere, including with these potential starting points identified by Shelburne Farms: threads, big ideas of sustainability, essential questions, and enduring understandings. A thread presents the context and content through which children will explore an essential question and some big ideas of sustainability. Threads may explore any of the following questions. Who are we? This guides children to discover how who we are builds and shapes healthy communities and ecosystems. Who lives here? This introduces children to the people, plants, and animals of their place. What's happening? This gives children the opportunity to discover and examine how people, plants, animals, and communities change over time, and how are we connected? This question cultivates an awareness and appreciation of what sustains us. For example, our food, fiber, and relationships.
I want to keep mine. Can I hold one?
An essential question is a question that the provider and children can ask and apply to all experiences throughout a thread. Essential questions are open-ended and have no one answer. They are intentionally examined throughout the course of study as children discover, explore, and make connections between current and prior learning experiences. For example, the essential question, how does our garden grow, can be explored through the What's Happening thread. Enduring understandings are what it is we want children to know or learn as a result of their experience. The enduring understandings in each thread elaborate on and clarify what children may take away from their investigation of the thread's big ideas and essential questions.
And you're going to count to 3.
For instance, gardens need water to grow.
3. Perfect.
Remember, you can explore education for sustainability through any framework. Incorporating these starting points will further assist you in developing rewarding programming.
Put it right in the hole. The whole thing.
So Jed, can you tell us how we can incorporate threads into our program?
Yeah, I think threads kind of weave themselves in through the whole program, interdisciplinary, so they're not just set in the garden per se. They are also set on your outings. They're also set in your community, in your classroom, at the cafeteria or the lunchroom. So as some of the examples were, the who are we could be a simple thread that's you talk about that all the time when you're working with a group of kids. It's that balance of valuing independence and also balancing that with groupness and bringing the group together into their own community. So the essential questions or the threads are kind of something that you can always come back to.
Okay. And you brought us right to essential questions. Tell us about some strategies for effectively exploring them within your program.
Sure. I think essential questions are really important to be accessible to the audience that you have. So if it's a 3-year-old group or if it's a 2-year-old group, it needs to be a question that they can kind of grapple with a little bit. There isn't an answer to it per se. There's not a right answer that ends the whole exploration. It's something that's ongoing. You should have it, or I would suggest having it posted so it's really clear in your room. So not only do you see it, your kids, the group sees it, you can reference it all the time, but the families see it. And communicating with the families is really essential. They're kind of your partnership in teaching, and they should be included in this. And I think in doing this, you're kind of advocating for the rights of not only the kids, but early educators as like a career path as well.
Great.
And I think if you have an essential question, if you're growing sunflowers in a small pot, And the question is, how do sunflowers grow? Well, after there's been some discussion, then you can use art and the children can interpret that themselves, and then that also leads to a second conversation with the families and perhaps their experiences with flowers.
So you're illustrating really what's going on there.
And you can bring that back to the who are we and like how do we grow? You know, plants grow like a little bit every day, just like we are. It's not like you over one night realize that shirt's too small. It's been getting there because you've been growing a little bit every day, just like a plant is.
Great. Do you think that it's important to let children craft their own questions?
The more open-ended we are with what we ask them, then the more they can find their own ideas. So, what do you see? How does that feel? What might be going on here, depending on the age of the child? Gives them an opportunity to launch their own ideas.
And can you illustrate those questions that children have, the questions that you're leading them to within your program?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways to learn, and some are going to be more visual learners, and I think that's a really great way to kind of reach those learners. And having kids, maybe that's like a prompt at a table in the morning at drop-off where you have maybe some watercolor out, and it's just your essential question that's there, and like what's your connection to the essential question, because yours is going to be different than mine and your experience is going to be different than mine. Then we could put those together, and to me that just adds a little bit more depth every time.
Sounds like fun too. There are so many ways to expand on and see where children want to drive the learning. We visited several programs that engage children in planting and gardening themes, activities, and essential questions. One of our goals is for you to take away some strategies that you can use to modify your own program. So Jed, you had the opportunity to work with the program in the next video. How did this partnership come about?
Yeah, they, a group of, I think there was 5 of them, Eric and 4 of their teachers came out to our week-long professional development opportunity for educators called Cultivating Joy and Project Seasons for Young Learners, Cultivating Joy and Wonder. Super long title, so good luck Googling that.
I'm guessing you probably have all these activities and events listed on your website. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, yeah, if you go to shelburnfarms.org and go under our work, and then for educators, you can find it. And it was really great to have Eric and a team of people. I think it helps to sustain the work when you come back to your place. A lot of people get really inspired. Our goal at Shelburne Farms with professional development is to do a lot of hands-on, balance that out with a lot of reflection, support discussions amongst teachers. It's one thing that teachers don't get to do enough of, is to have professional dialogue with each other, and then also have a little rejuvenation. So it's a really gorgeous area, but one of the big things is like, how am I going to bring this back? How am I going to bring this back? Well, Eric brought 5 people with him, so bringing it back and having a really supportive network together, I think has helped make some changes in a very short amount of time.
Great. Okay, so let's see what happened in the program you visited. Let's watch.
The Early Head Start framework focuses on key areas of development. One of those key areas is approaches to learning. Children being engaged in play in an effort to learn about the world around them.
Up here? All right, some lemongrass.
So there's certain things that we need to incorporate our curriculum to touch upon all those key areas.
Look at the roots. It's already growing so well.
Science, math, technology, creative arts. So we look at our what each classroom needs, and our teachers. We talk to our teachers. What do you want to incorporate in your classroom this year? What do you need, and how we can make that happen?
Can you feel how soft this is?
When Eric first approached me about the training in Vermont, at first I was like, okay, it sounds like a really interesting training. Sure. He goes to the training, he comes back, and he comes to my office and he says, Ann, do you have 5 minutes? 5 minutes, I want to tell you about this training. And just from his reaction, his enthusiasm, I thought to myself, this is going to take more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, do you have a garden at your house?
I think after going to the training in Vermont with Jed, it kind of motivated us to get a little more into this. I mean, we were doing some of the stuff that we saw at the training, but definitely not to that level. One of the days when we were in Vermont, we went up to the garden out back, and Jed had taken us around to taste different things. So I remember we got to try some lemongrass and some raspberries and different things that were all blooming at the time. And the people that came with me, who are the teachers in this classroom, said we have to bring this back home, so we need to make a tasting garden, or we have to do a sensory garden of some sort. So initially it was just going to be foods they can taste, but then we added a couple other things that were kind of soft, so the kids at this age could kind of feel it or smell and taste, and some bright colors so they could see right out front when they walk in. So it's new this year that we just did that like a month ago or so. So now we want to have it grow every year and kind of have the parents involved. So we got the parents involved back in October by having a garden planning party. So the parents got to taste and try different things. We had the lemongrass, the cherry tomatoes, and then they voted on the ones they wanted to see in our garden. And so now we're incorporating what they said they wanted into the sensory garden out front.
It smells so good. You can smell it.
Sustainability is important because a lot of children don't know where food comes from.
Put the dirt back around it, scrape it in.
We want the children to understand where their food comes from. When the cart comes in from the kitchen, they think it comes from the kitchen. Or when they go shopping with their families, they think the food comes from the store. We want them to understand that it comes from outside, that we grow it, we harvest it, and that's how we get our food, our fruits and vegetables.
Nina, did you try your strawberries?
We had the strawberries for breakfast this morning, so we decided after looking at our menu that we would plant our strawberries today, and that we would also compost the strawberries from breakfast so they understand that the food that they don't eat or completely eat can be turned around to help nurture the soil that they're planting the food in that they're going to eat later. Come in here. The composting bin has two sides. We just started that after we got back from Shelburne, and it's about ready to be used in our garden. So we will let it go for a couple more weeks, and we will mix that in with the soil that we are using now, and then we'll start fresh with a new batch of compost.
Look. It already has a strawberry.
Well, at this age, most of them are 2. So understanding the concept is sometimes a work in progress. It takes time, so we repeat the activities to make sure that they understand that we're eating the strawberries, we're growing the strawberries. So when we go out every day on the playground, we'll check them, we'll remind them the strawberries we ate, these are the ones we planted. Are they growing? Are they changing? And they will help water them and watch them grow with us.
Some water to grow.
I just think the earlier that they learn something, as they say, you teach a second language at a young age, the kids are more likely to pick up on it. If you teach recycling, composting, at this age, then it becomes second nature. Then you're instilling those values that, oh, this plastic cup doesn't go in the garbage, it goes in the recycling bin.
Can you rinse it out and put it in recycling for me? Thank you.
Or this banana peel doesn't go with the other stuff, we need to bring that out to the composter. And the younger they are to learn something, I think it's easier to pick up a skill when you're younger than it is to try to teach an adult to change habits that have been around for a long time.
Look, Mommy.
Ooh, what's this? I love the program. All 3 of mine are in it, so I have everybody doing the different levels, the home-based, combination option, and the UPK. And we just love it. Do you want to shovel? Okay, shovel. Go. The gardening, the learning, everything about the different plants. We've done some home visits where they come in and we start them out in like a little cup, or I've done one where we did like one of the old egg cartons and you put some seedlings in there and then transferring them into a garden. It really helps people to learn that you can grow your own food at home. You don't have to go out and buy it. It saves a lot of money too. Are you ready, Amina?
It can be intimidating at first when you first start, but over time when you get parent involvement and other coworkers decide to help, then it's like a community of people that all want to work together, and it goes a little easier when you're sharing the responsibility with other people. And to extend that to coworkers, the families, anyone that you really know that would be interested in helping.
We're gonna dig over here probably.
We want children to be able to take what they're learning in the classroom and apply it to real life. That's what we want to see.
All right, good job, buddy.
We saw some really great things happening in that video. Tell me what you saw.
I saw where food actually comes from nature and the plants. And I saw the children taking not just the care to plant it, but then later on taking the food waste and making it into compost, which is going to feed those plants even more. And I saw a lot of teachers who may not have been comfortable, but they were doing it anyway. And that's how we all learn.
Yeah, I think the cycle of having strawberries and then feeding it to the compost and then using the sun's energy to break down that compost is like a really cool cycle that kids can really get behind. And there's jobs and there's service learning jobs built in, whether you're bringing the recycle cup to the recycling or you're bringing out the compost to dump in the bins. The other thing I saw was a really great connection to a family. And Eric's reference to saying we were already doing some of this work, but when we came back, we had more people on board and we got more intentional. And we got so intentional that we took those planters and moved them into the front of the school. So it wasn't like the garden bed or the raised bed in the back of the playground anymore. It was, you're gonna literally walk by these every single day when you drop your kids off at school and every day when you leave and you drop your kids off at school, which to me is such a really great connection to the influence that kids can have on their families and how empowering it's got to feel for a kid to bring a parent over to feel some of the lamb's ear and how soft it is. And I really appreciated how they really thought about their group of kids and all the different textures and sensory experiences that the garden could provide, that it's not just for food, but it's also for exploration, colors and textures, and soil and worms.
Sounds like making it really a part of your culture is really important.
Yeah, and I think creating some buy-in not only from the staff and the administrator, but also the families. And it seemed like they had a really great connection with that one particular family, and it seems to be paying off. And just like Michelle referenced, that it really takes a support network to do it, and then it kind of doesn't really feel so much like work.
I see a lot of providers asking the families open-ended questions, what's your experience with this activity? And then that leads to a conversation that makes them think and maybe stay a little bit longer with their child, or possibly even share their experience in a way that helps move the program forward.
Now, would you use families as experts sometimes?
Absolutely. In fact, they come up with all these enthusiastic ideas. At one center, they were looking at potatoes, and they had some that had grown the eyes, and they didn't necessarily want to use them for the food, though you can just take those off and safely use them. But they brought them into the school so that the children could see the pieces when they did put it into the soil in the cups and see what happens next. There's a great mystery and a great reveal with any of these kinds of things. And it doesn't have to last forever. It can be done just on a windowsill, and then you have the experience.
That's great. Thanks, Bonnie.
I think also when you invite in families, you also hear a little bit more about their history. So many times have I heard about, like, oh, when I visited my relative when I was a kid, they had a garden. And you know, they might have just through different things just gotten disconnected from that, but it always comes back to them a little bit.
Great, thanks. Each thread or theme offers a variety of opportunities to reflect on, document, and assess learning. For this reason, it's important to observe children and note their engagement in each self-guided or facilitated learning experience. So how can providers document and assess children's work and understanding?
I think documentation of learning is a really key component of that, whether it's just a quick picture or if it's just a quick, like, anecdotal note about what happened that day, how maybe a child referenced a sunflower to, like, the size of their leg. Just a little quick snippet of the learning that's happening and getting that home to families is so important to advocating for what the play-based learning that is happening.
Speaking of play, I see you brought some props along. Can you tell us about some of these?
Sure. This is child-powered, or human-powered, I guess, but food processor.
Not really play, but more learning about the world and food and vegetables.
So if we had that garlic that was out earlier, we could have made a very interesting dip by putting it in here. And it breaks down the barriers of having to have like a food processor on site or having to bring things inside. If you could just harvest something right there and break it out and give it a pull and pass this around and hold it down, Do you want to try?
My turn next.
So you're using safety here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of safety. You're right, Bonnie. We got to make sure we're supervising while we're using these.
Really easy to make like a white bean dip with a group of kids right before their snack.
What about this one?
This I like a lot. I should maybe take it out. But it's a wavy chopper, and it cuts things in wavy form, which is really awesome. And two, it has a really nice, comfortable handle for kids. So we kind of go over some knife safety, and one of the questions I always ask.
Watching them when they
are
totally. Using knives, you're
Before
supervising.
we get out any knives, we always talk about how do you pass a knife. Bonnie, how do you pass a knife?
You pass it with the handle side.
Trick question. You put the knife down. You never pass a
Thank
knife.
you.
And you
See?
let Bonnie pick it up.
Nice.
So we always talk about that, and then we break out the choppers and go. Like what I'll try and do is cut a flat end of like a potato, leave it there, and then kids can chop it. And they're sharp enough to chop, but not sharp enough that they're gonna cut fingers. And we do some skill building.
The hands, both hands are on top as they're cutting down to that flat surfaced vegetable?
Yeah.
And I can see being really close to the kids when you're doing this sort of activity, supervising them, making sure that you're really watching every move that they make so that they're careful and safe. Yep, great. Thanks.
I like the idea of having artifacts, and it could be something that they make. It could be something that they find to document it. Perhaps they find a special rock, a superior leaf, an acorn, and that can help them explain what happened and what it represents. Absolutely. So there's a lot of different ways to document.
I think children are natural collectors. So they want to bring back those token items all the time. And I think oftentimes like we find them in the washer or the dryer, and those are really important to them. And you wait 3 months and you ask them, and they know exactly where that came from.
Great, thanks. As a provider, you can also build on children's natural curiosity by developing their interest in science, technology, engineering, art, and math, also known as STEAM. STEAM can refer to these areas individually or one or more working together, but also mean a way of doing things that includes solving problems, asking questions, and exploring the world around us. STEAM learning is part of sustainability education and can happen anywhere and at any time. So providers, I think, may have heard of STEM instead of STEAM. What's the difference? What's the A stand for?
It's all about art in there, and I think with all these disciplines of science, technology, engineering, math, and now we include art in there, it's about exploring and problem solving. And so it just takes on another dimension of learning styles. And I think of art not just as drawing or painting or flat. It could be three-dimensional. It could be acting. It could be dancing or singing. There's a whole variety of ways that they can express and put their ideas together.
I could see it more about the process than the product. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's definitely a little bit of consumerism in the process, and whether it is like you're trying to figure out this one problem, and maybe you're trying it with some clay, maybe you're trying it with some watercolor, maybe you're trying it with blocks. I think of kids as like professional block builders, and as we walk around and we see like a building coming up, it's like such a cool connection for them to see kind of the insides of the building and how it relates back to when they build their blocks.
Great. So maybe just put some materials out there and let children explore. Great. Where in their programs can providers offer opportunities for STEAM learning?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It can be in any time and any space, because naturally we are using math all the time to figure out what's fair and how to divide things, or what's the same and different, how we can group. They're automatically asking questions and they're curious at this age. So seeing how the world works is so much of science, trying to make observations. It can be in any context, and then when they get their ideas, they can express them. Engineering is all about building to solve a problem, building a system, building actual physical things. And technology, to me, is not all fancy and electronic. It's any kind of a tool, and using it safely.
Right. We talk about at the farm a lot how a shovel is a really simple tool that kids can relate to really easily. A wheelbarrow, another really simple tool. A ramp is another really simple tool. And those are the technologies that you can draw connections to for kids.
Great. Recently, Bonnie had the opportunity to visit a group family daycare program where she engaged children in a STEAM activity, exploring outdoor gardening and sunflower planting. Let's go to that video.
Okay, ready guys? Yeah! When I pat your head is when you can go. You ready? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So this morning we're going to have the children come out here and they're going to be looking a little bit at sunflowers and how they grow. So we have some samples here, and before we got started we had them feeling just a bag of soil from the outside and not really knowing what it was, but then looking at the pictures to gain those clues. So when they do come out, we're going to try to pull it together with actually physically feeling this, thinking about it, and then taking it from the very start with the soil, with the seeds, with the water, making their own starts. So to give them choice, we have a variety of containers here, things that are easily recyclable, reusable. All they need are drainage holes, and those are easy enough for an adult to poke. And then we have options that might be handy for them to take home. We have a coir pot, and if we hold it up to the light, we can sort of see that there's light shining through, so it doesn't need a hole because it's porous enough, the water will flow. The children will have a choice of what they plant in, but these are particularly nice because they will go directly in the ground and they will decompose. So this is great if they're choosing to take their seedlings home. With their container of choice in hand, whatever it may be, anything where water will soak through and it will hold the soil.
Carry to the table. There's yours.
We'll proceed back to the table, fill it on up, poke their holes, cover it. We're pretty much done. Oh wait, and then we have to water it.
Declan, you need to add some water to yours still?
I always love to watch things grow on a daily basis, so we could check them, and they could say it could be something we could incorporate measuring into. We could take a ruler outside and say, oh, let's see how much this flower has grown. And for now, it could be something that we do once a week, and they can watch something grow from a tiny seed to either a 2-foot or 6-foot sunflower, which is, I think that in itself is one of the reasons that I love sunflowers particularly, because I think it's amazing that this tiny little thing can grow so big. And that always reminds me of the children, because you get these teeny tiny babies and then 4 or 5 years later you're sending them off to schools.
Is that so pretty? High five.
And I would encourage any providers that may either be stuck or not know what to do to reach out for those resources. Look for resources online, talk to your licensor, call the Child Care Council. It's really just your time and the children's time, and it benefits everybody. So I just think it's a win-win.
And then fill it in. And you just planted a sunflower.
Bonnie, tell us how the activity that you just saw relates to STEAM and sustainability.
We certainly have the growing experience. We had different parts of the plants that we were examining, putting the seed in, and then for the larger ones, the roots, the stem, the leaves, and the flowers. I love how the provider there, Cheryl, was talking about measuring it, and she talked about using a ruler, which is absolutely terrific. But children don't always have the number sense at this age, so they can even measure using their body. Is it as tall as your knuckles, your wrist, when you're standing on your knees, and so on, so they can sort of grow with it. I love that she didn't say science was just one day. It's something over time. The children will continue to revisit it all the time. We did plant some extras, but I know there's certainly some circumstances where children learn about science and sad times. Can you share? And limits that.
I was commenting with Bonnie about how, the opportunity that you can learn from if a garden doesn't grow, or if a sunflower does work in one area and it doesn't work in another. Engage the kids. Why do you think? What's happening here? What's going on? What's different about this place? What did we do different? And reflecting, and then revamping and redesigning.
Great. What advice would you give to a provider who says, oh, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at gardening? How would you go from there?
Start small. I would tell them it's okay. I'm not that good at them either, but it's okay to start with something like this and not even let it get this big. As soon as it gets really small, snip it, and you can have a microgreen right there.
And when it comes to things, math naturally makes sense, like how much water to put in. And with children, if you give them a cup, they might put it all in, that's a whole, or maybe they're being a little bit slower, oh, you put in a half. Just using these words and then having those comparisons builds capacity for numbers and seeing what works.
Bonnie brings up a good point. I think sometimes providers think that they're thinking traditional math, like back to their school math, like algebra, and they're like, it's not, but it's not about that. It's about filling and dumping. I think even young toddlers in a water sensory table are engaging in math all the time. It's putting out plates for snack time is a one-to-one correspondence. I think they can start there and build from that.
And if they do pour a whole lot of water in, the soil goes everywhere. We have soil erosion, which is a fancy term that maybe adults use, but goodness gracious, there's forces and things move. So there is even physics. And it's all about what naturally happens in making those observations.
Research suggests that for many adults, STEAM curriculum can be intimidating, especially if they didn't have much exposure to math or science as a child or found it difficult in school. In this next video, we highlight tips for incorporating these subjects into your programming. Let's go.
Here are some tips to help you incorporate opportunities for STEAM education in your program. Look at the world around you. Communicate throughout the day about what you see, feel, smell, taste, or hear, and encourage the children to do the same.
And what is yours? Is yours Minion or what is yours?
Ask open-ended questions like, what would happen if?
An ice volcano? Now, what are these over here?
This promotes curiosity and exploration. Follow the child's lead. Observe children closely and see what they are looking at, pointing to, or seem curious about.
Triangles.
Learn along with the children. Communicating and trying to make sense of the world, even if you don't have all the correct answers, are important skills. Use books. Incorporate books about animals, nature, and science. And sing. Songs with repetitive patterns like Old MacDonald Had a Farm teach children about patterns and other related STEAM concepts. Incorporating these tips will put you and the children in your care on the right path to fun and exciting STEAM exploration.
So tell us about some math activities or themes that providers can engage children in.
Well, when you have a variety of materials available, you can look at the possibilities to sort. And if each of us tried sorting some of these seeds here, we might sort them in a different way and talk about why we grouped them the way that we did, and then mix them all together and sort them again. So there's plenty to do with math, and even seeing the size of the seed compared to, if you have photos of what these things came from, the size of the plant.
I could see maybe comparing and contrasting.
When I was in the infant room, and many infant rooms that I've seen since use a lot of ramps and balls and tubes. And so if you put a tube out with a bunch of different materials, some of the materials fit down the tube and some of the materials don't. And that processing that's going on, some kids will just grab it without looking, and as soon as they touch something that they know doesn't fit, they'll put it down. And we used to collect natural materials from outside and bring them in, but if that's not an option, then simply materials from the classroom, whether it's blocks, they don't need to roll. That's for them to figure out what rolls and what doesn't. Trucks, balls, dolls.
Great. You're bringing us right to science, technology, and engineering. How can we do that with our littlest ones?
Well, that one example I just gave is a really good one. I think giving kids the trial and error and areas to practice, and I find that the youngest kids really like to move things, and so figuring out ways that they can maybe create a simple system for them to move something that's heavy with a stick.
We can use tools, and we can use different color pieces of plastic to see how it changes our view. We could take this and mix it with other things and get more into art activity if you had some perhaps Play-Doh and then they were putting this in as a way of feeling and creating whatever kind of a pattern.
Great.
There's a lot of different options.
Great. STEAM programming in early childhood settings can take many forms, utilizing the materials, resources, and spaces you already have available to you. In the next video, we'll see how a preschool program implements ongoing STEAM curriculum by employing these strategies. Let's watch.
This was going to be our last week of planting and gardening, but the children have been so curious and motivated and want to know more. You know, Mary and I sat down and said our original plan was this, but you know, what else can we do? How can we take this farther? What else can we give them? Because when they feel honored and their interests and their curiosities are brought in, it just makes, we are able to go deeper and get even more information.
We decided that what we would do is we would teach the children that we can start plants from seeds, we can also start them as seedlings and plant them in the ground. So that's what we're doing today, and that's why we decided that this would be the next step in that learning process, is planting an actual seedling and then taking care of it, watering it, watching it grow, and following it through till it's ready to actually have the children take it home and transplant it.
It was important for the children to understand how it begins and the steps and the stages in which it will grow, and also to know that once they have that seedling, they planted it and it produces, that it can start all over again, that this isn't something that's just one time. They can actually take some of the tomatoes that the plant produces, cut them open, find the seeds, investigate them, and start the process all over. I started with just the 5 stages. As you look into it, you can kind of get into the nitty-gritty details, but for children who are 3, 4, and 5, I chose 5. I felt like they were able to handle that much information and decipher between the different stages. So they took a long sheet of paper, numbered the top of the paper 1 through 5, cut the section so that was like a little flip book, and underneath each section they had to decide which picture showed the first step, which was the seed, the second step, which was the small seedling, the third step, the medium-sized seedling, the fourth, and then the fifth. And at that point, I let them independently decide where the pictures fell, and that allowed me to see and kind of evaluate their understanding of the lesson.
And I think that that's where STEAM education is all tied together. So what we do with STEAM is we bring the science, the technology, the engineering, the art, and the math together. So in that activity, you had a math component, you had the science component, and again with our program in other areas, we bring in the art, the technology, and then the not so much engineering at this point. We do that in other areas of our program. Just earlier in the week, we did a story called Tops and Bottoms, which was a wonderful literature experience that also is integrated into our program. And we discussed plants that grow on the top and plants that grow underneath the ground. And then we actually did an art activity where the children were using watercolors and they were using the oil pastels to illustrate some of the vegetables that we read about in the story. So we're recalling and we're actually tying all of that into what we're doing so that it really reaches all different types of learners. We do songs, we do stories, we do our hands-on experiences, and we give them many opportunities throughout the program to model and to demonstrate their understanding. We were even on the playground yesterday, and one of our students was pulling roots and pulling things out of the ground, and come see, there's a stem, there's a root. And so you're starting to see their excitement and their just enthusiasm about their understanding and the transfer of knowledge from one aspect of their day into life experiences. And so my hope is that they're taking those same skills and that same understanding and bringing it home and sharing it with their families and with those around them.
As children grow, STEAM curriculum can become more complex with ever-evolving questions and experiments. During this next video, we'll watch as school-age children embark on a STEAM project that integrates multiple subjects and explores the question, how do solar panels work? Let's watch.
But they're not moving. What do we need for electricity to travel around? What do we call that? Electricity to travel around, I need a complete what? Nick? Circuit. I need a circuit.
We think of science and math, these different subjects that a lot of times are taught in these silos individually. And STEM or STEAM is really the funneling of all those together, that we do activities where all those elements are coming in. And the idea with that is that when students grow up, they're going to be out in society. And so they're going to be making decisions, and we want them to have be able to make educated decisions.
I'm sure you guys have seen these.
Solar panels.
Okay, solar panels.
I had the students look at solar panels and then question them about what is a solar panel made of, and then had them measure electricity that was generated with that solar panel. So the students have been using wind turbines to generate electricity, and that has moving parts. I wanted them to take a look at the solar panels, and I asked them to think about where they see these in the community, and they were able to tell me that they see them in fields, they see them on buildings, they see them on houses.
What is a solar panel doing? I want you to think for a minute. Tell the people at your group, what is the purpose of this? What are these doing? Go ahead, share with the people at your group.
It's to give you energy. It gives you energy for you could use it for your PlayStation.
Most of the electricity that we produced is produced by burning fossil fuels.
What do you mean by saving energy?
Not burning fossil fuels.
And so they were, able to state that, and now this is, okay, so here's an example of, they understand the idea of that the renewable energy is not polluting, but they really don't understand how that energy is produced. So to kind of add to what they already know, okay, they know the solar panels are in their community, now can they begin to think about why is that really working? So the next time they see one and someone talks about that, they can be the one to say, hey, did you know that it's made of silicone, and then how that's made, and just kind of take that one step further for them.
Does anybody know what this is made up of? What is a solar panel, the number one thing a solar panel is made up of?
Energy.
So it's not made up of energy, it's creating energy. But good guess, Lily. Hunter?
Protons and electrons.
So there are protons and electrons in this. What is moving that generates the electricity? What is the moving? Is the proton moving or the electron moving?
The electron.
The electrons are moving, right? We talked about that with the generator.
The whole idea behind this is that you don't need to know the answers, but you're trying to discover those answers. So if somebody sets up a solar panel and like right here in the class when we did this activity, some of the students, when I opened the blinds, could see that the ones closer to the window produced more electricity. Well, someone's going to be like, well, why is theirs producing more? Well, when you walk around and discover that the closer I get to the window, the higher the electricity, the voltage it is that it produced, then they can start to deduce that. So you might not know that outside light's going to produce more energy than the artificial light inside.
6, 8, 9.
But you can begin to discover that. So it's the idea that you don't need to know the answers, but by exploring and coming up with more questions, then they can find more answers.
Am I going to leave it flat, or am I going to put it at an angle? Go ahead, talk amongst the group. Talk amongst the group.
It moves down. At sunset, it moves down.
I think the STEM instructor is the facilitator to help people learn. And there's many times that I don't have the answers, and I'll tell the students I don't have the answers. But
go ahead.
Oftentimes, there's students that will say, well, I know, and I'm like, okay, you're on. The stage is yours. Can you tell me and tell everybody else at the same time, how'd you come up with that? And because I want to know, and you figured it out, explain it to us. So it's that whole idea, I think, of that cooperative learning, just whereas I talked about STEM is funneling all those different subjects and using them all into one. It's the same idea with the learning. It's learning from everybody. Also, to tie this to future careers, that there's careers in energy, and we talked about that a lot. Just we look at the exponential growth that's taking place in renewable energy. So these students can take these ideas, and maybe that sparks an interest in, this is what I want to do for a career. That and it doesn't even necessarily, they might not like the idea of measuring electricity, but they might like the idea of, because we talked about that we used one panel, but they see on a house many panels. Well, someone had to decide what those layouts are. So there's so many different connections to different careers that kids might find a buy-in for.
We just went up to 2.
Ultimately, I want the students to be lifelong learners. I want them to go out and say, you know, I have a problem. Okay, well, let's tackle that problem. What can we do to solve it?
Tell me how a classroom theme like the one we just saw in the video can be explored within a child care program.
I really enjoyed watching the process of that teacher and his acknowledgement that he didn't know the answer. And I think that's really important to know that teachers don't know everything. And you don't have to know everything. You should be a co-learner and a co-constructor with your group of kids. You should be as invested in the work as they are. And I think it makes for a more authentic experience. And the trial and error part of it. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to reflect on that. It's not the end of the world when that happens. It's a place for reflection and learning, and then to redesign and move forward.
I think to explore the sun's energy, if you have that equipment, that's great, but particularly for younger learners, it might be effective to take something like tea bags and a glass jar and make a sun tea, and have them feeling the jar as it warms up and getting a sense of how the sun's energy can be absorbed. Then perhaps maybe in the classroom or as an individual activity, they might have different cloths they could wrap around, a white and a black, and see which one is feeling differently as they move towards or away from the sun. And if you want to look over time at the sun's effect, you might take a piece of darker construction paper, put something on it to block an area, and put it in the sun to see what's going to happen then. We start to give them a few ideas like this, and they'll come up with more ideas on their own.
Great, thanks. Now, we talked about a lot of fun things, and we keep talking about planting and seeds. We shared some seeds here earlier that we saw. Just a little reminder that we want to be really careful around seeds because they can present a choking hazard. So just supervise and make sure you're keeping an eye on those kids. Great.
I always tell providers that you got to know your group. This is not, like I wouldn't put this out on day one with a group of kids. That's just asking for trouble.
Yep. Thanks. For more information on the solar panel project and theme explored in the video, refer to the resource section in your participant materials. It's now time for another activity. During this segment, we explored how you can use threads and essential questions to prompt learning and to provide ways you can integrate STEAM activities into your program. Take the next few minutes to review the list of essential questions on page 27 in your participant materials. Then identify essential questions you have already or may want to explore and share your ideas with the group. When we return, we'll discuss the importance of self-guided opportunities and space configurations for learning. We'll see you soon. Children learn best through play and by having a variety of choices and materials throughout the program to stimulate learning. This next video shows space arrangements and items you can offer children to promote exploration. Let's watch.
The following self-guided opportunities and materials can assist you in promoting child exploration and learning. Loose parts. Loose parts are movable props, natural and human-made, that children can use in a variety of ways, indoors and outdoors, as they play. Parts can be stacked, aligned, piled, moved, taken apart, and reassembled. They have no rules and can be used to suit the child's imagination. Dramatic play. A dramatic play area provides an opportunity for children to learn through doing. Engaging in dramatic play allows children to experiment, explore roles, and develop language skills. Outdoor play. Unstructured time and space for children to engage in self-directed outdoor play is crucial for children to develop a relationship with the natural world. Art. An art studio or area provides an opportunity for children to creatively express themselves, as well as develop fine motor skills. Literacy. Developing children's language and literacy skills is a core component of early childhood education. Provide opportunities for children to engage with literature throughout the room. Post photographs taken during the course of study. Offer journaling as an activity choice, and invite children to label dramatic play props and art projects. Maps can provide models of words that connect to the community. Numeracy. The early childhood classroom or program introduces children to numbers and math.
Very good.
Children unknowingly count, compare, classify, sort, graph, and tally as they learn. Explore table. An explore table is a place where children can investigate and discover items related to what they are learning. This can include a water table, sand table, or gardening table. Use these ideas when thinking about your program's area and how best to configure your space to stimulate wonder and development.
Okay, let's break this down. When we say outdoor play spaces, we might think of the playground. What else is there?
I mean, in my experience, there's neighborhood parks. Where I currently am, there's fields, there's forests, but that's not accessible for everybody. So I think in Burlington, there's a waterfront area that's kind of like an open park that I know, and there's a free shuttle that gets there for a lot of childcare programs.
Yeah, for by the water, we're going to make sure we supervise again.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What about things as simple as bringing things from outside indoors?
I love the idea that you can completely change dramatic play by bringing those props outdoors. You can have an art studio outdoors and the light is phenomenal. So anything that you do in the classroom can be a completely different experience if you just set up a section that's dedicated to that. And it keeps it fresh even in a limited space.
Great. Is an outdoor play space the same as an outdoor classroom?
Not at all. Because the children have a certain expectation. It's time to go outside and play, and they're going to be super excited to do their own ideas for play. But I found that I can use the same space as an outdoor classroom if I set the expectations before we ever open the door. And then they know there's a purpose and there's a certain amount of time and a role that they're there for. And usually we'll have in that ending plan that there will be time for free play afterwards.
So you have to be a little more structured in the outdoor classroom as opposed to an outdoor play space.
And what does that mean? So like with anything, we teach them this is what it means to be in the classroom now, and this is what we're going to do. At the end, you'll be able to go and do other things and then you set the limit.
You might
say
call
it's
them researchers and maybe give them a prop of just a simple magnifying glass, and they have a job and a task to do, or maybe a tiny clipboard, or something that they need to report back. Maybe it's checking the sunflowers, and then as soon as that job is done, then we can move on to other things. But I think giving them that prompt and that prop can be really important to setting kind of the culture of what you're going to do when you get outside.
A reminder in their hand.
Yeah.
How can caregivers provide these opportunities if they only have a limited space or even a shared space?
I mean, I've seen with a shared space, there's schedule, they create schedules where certain times of the day people go outside, and there are some barriers to that, but there's also opportunities for a classroom if they have a goal in mind and their schedule is maybe earlier in the day and they really want to go to later in the day. Maybe that's a really good way to kind of communicate with that other classroom about maybe a switch and some intentionality around that. So I think there's opportunities to be had still. There's also families that have a lot of things, or maybe don't have a lot of things, but they can at least provide some. I think putting the word out in your neighborhoods too, I think is a really key. And the other thing, I also think less can be more. I think there can be, just like Dr. Gray talked about in the beginning, kids are really looking not so much for materials, but for each other.
Great. Along with appropriate play spaces, young children need toys and materials like puppets and dress-up clothing, which they can use to create storylines and process their learning. So what should providers keep in mind when selecting props and for their play spaces or items for their play spaces?
Obviously, safety and supervision to make sure that they have clear expectations, and the children do as well. And I think changing.
Oh, go ahead.
Changing it helps keep it very fresh. What kinds of things would you suggest?
I think having some open-ended, just simple like sticks, maybe some stumps. Those have always been successful for me.
You'll have to supervise them
absolutely,
with those sticks.
Of course. And I think I love the connection to dramatic play and puppets. A lot of the times I've used puppets as a way to kind of work through a social problem that's maybe come up. It's really hard, like if we get in a little bit of a tiff, for us to separate our emotions and really talk through this. But if Bonnie can come over and support us by using some puppets and maybe acting out the experience of what happened, it kind of allows us to separate our emotions from it and maybe come up with kind of a solution.
I think it might be important too when you're using those puppets to sort of introduce some diversity through use of puppets and dolls. Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. I mean, I think, when you're using puppets and props, that you're introducing kind of a diversity through not using yourself as the material, and also introducing kind of that difference of ideas and how we can still compromise and come to a solution.
Great. Bonnie, do you have anything to add?
I think you really covered it.
Great. Okay, so we sure have covered a lot of important and valuable material today. However, we're out of time. Your questions are important to us, and if we were unable to answer your question live, someone will follow up with you. Bonnie, Jed, any final thoughts?
Thanks so much for having us. This has been really fun. I hope people continue on their journeys, and certainly reach out if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Jen.
And for providers, just try things, go for it, because together with the children, we will explore and have fun.
Sounds great. To view more informative videos like the ones you saw today, visit our new Early Childhood Education and Training Program YouTube channel. There you will find many video resources that we've made with your help. Just go to YouTube and search for ECETP. Hit the subscribe button on the channel and share with your friends. Bonnie and Jed, thank you both for being here today to share your expertise with us. We'd also like to thank Dr. Peter Gray, the Radix Center, and the programs and schools featured in today's training. Finally, thank you for your participation. Remember, learning can happen at any time, at any place, and with whatever you have. By utilizing educating for sustainability techniques, you help children learn to make decisions based on understanding the natural and human communities in which we live, that we're all interconnected and depend on each other, and that we have the ability to make meaningful contributions and change. Please stay tuned for the post-test, and remember to sign the attestation statement at the end of the test and the roster so you can receive credit for tonight's training. Have a good night.